This is a podcast about visual art at Auburn University. My name is Chris Molinsky from the Jule Smith Museum of Fine Art. In today's episode, we're excited to share an excerpt of a radio broadcast from WEGL 91.1 FM, the campus radio station. This excerpt is from a show called It's All History to Me, where Auburn students have in-depth conversations with faculty and staff across the university. Our colleague Randi Evans was recently featured on the show, talking about our work at the museum and how we think about education, engagement, and learning as part of Auburn University. This episode was recorded early in the fall semester, and it's December now, so a couple of the references will seem out of date.
Good morning and welcome back to It's All History to Me. This morning we are joined by Dr. Randi Evans from the Jule Smith Museum of Fine Art. To kick off our next section, we want to talk about some of the permanent collections at the museum, including a wide variety. Can you talk a little bit more about what goes into determining who these artists are and that sort of vein of things?
Yeah, so we, since we are an academic museum, we change our exhibitions kind of on this semester schedule. And so we just opened new exhibitions at the beginning of August, and those will be up through the beginning of December. And we have, we're a small staff, we're a collaborative team, so people are always bringing ideas about things that they might see or are interested in. I think one of the things that's challenging about museum work and being in academia in general is that those are slow processes. And so as much as we want to be timely and responsive to the moment, we often are thinking several years ahead about what kind of exhibitions are coming up. So this year we've started a new thing where we are planning our exhibitions around a theme that we'll have for the whole academic year.
Okay.
And we are planning themes several years out, and that's a way for us to kind of connect the exhibitions more thoroughly, but then also allow us some room with our programming to think more broadly about a specific theme. So this semester we're focusing on the theme of work, which was inspired by the Auburn Creed, which has an emphasis on work and hard work. But I think what's interesting about it is there's lots of representations of labor that we have in our as part of our exhibition from our permanent collection right now called People at Work. But then we have two exhibiting artists who are thinking about work in different ways. One of the artists, Daniel Newman, he worked with professional animal artists, dog artists and monkey artists to create these works. And so in a way, he's thinking about deferred labor. And I kind of see his work in line with other artists who kind of let chance determine the end result of it. So he's not so concerned with the end result as he is about this kind of process and what it means to work with non-human animal artists. And so that's kind of an interesting connection. And then and there's a whole history of animal art that we recently discovered by hosting a art history scholar that kind of focuses on this history of primate painting and different ways that it's come in through anthropology, but also through the visual arts. And then we have another exhibiting artist, Rachel Liebeskin, who actually is on campus right now, and we'll be doing an artist talk tonight, and she's a Berlin-based artist who's also interested in archives, and so a lot of her work is of her going through archives across time, across geographic regions, and she kind of puts together these assemblages or big collage sculptures, and they're really interesting to look at and to engage with. And she also connected with our special collections here on campus and pulled out some archives from there that are on display in the museum. It's a really exciting exhibition where you can see her work in conversation with these collections from special collections and how they're engaged with each other.
Yeah, that's an awesome partnership with the university too. Wow.
Yeah.
So how are the works taken care of by the Jule that become part of the permanent collection when they're on display or when they're not?
Yeah, so many people, when they come visit the Jule, they spend time in our galleries, which is kind of on the main floor. But underneath the Jule is a basement area, and that's where our vault is. And so the museum has about 3,200 objects held in our collection.
Wow.
And they're all stored on site, for the most part, in our vault. And we have a curatorial team that works to take care of those objects. But there is a lot of things to consider. We have to think about temperature, humidity requirements, light, how to care for sometimes fragile objects and things like that. Sometimes things need to be conserved. And so, it's a big undertaking to be the stewards of a collection and to care for it. Our collection is held in the public trust for the people of the state of Alabama. So even though we're the caretakers, it's technically everyone's collection.
Wow.
And I think that's something interesting to think about. And I hope that students and people at Auburn feel pride in the collection that we have here, because it really is for the public. It's and we're the caretakers, and our goal is to care for them in perpetuity, and that's a big it's a big ask, but we feel really privileged to be able to do that work.
Absolutely. That's amazing. What is your favorite piece on from the museum's permanent collection, whether it's on display right now or not?
Oh, yeah, I saw this question, and it's a hard one because it felt like picking your favorite child in a way. But I thought of one. What I thought of when I saw this question was during my initial days at the museum, I was lucky enough to spend time with our registrar in the vault and just kind of go through the collection, because you can view our collection online on our website, but there's something different about seeing art in person and seeing the objects in person. So being able to go in the vault and see all the work was really overwhelming. But I was really struck by this piece. It's not on display right now. Maybe in the future it will be. But this piece by Roger Brown, who's an artist. He was raised in Opelika and then moved to Chicago and had this great career, and unfortunately died in the 90s from AIDS. But I saw this piece by him called Fear No Evil. And I immediately, although I didn't know Roger Brown at the time, I immediately recognized the context and the content of the piece. It has a man and his eyes are being covered, and it says, "Fear no evil, see no evil." And then underneath it says Jesse Helms. And I immediately placed this piece from the time period of the early 90s and the AIDS crisis and the way that artists were attacked by the NEA during that time period, and how artists, particularly queer artists and artists of color, were censored by the NEA and other government agencies. And that's a particular research focus of mine, is work of that time period. And so when I saw that, I was like, I know this piece. I don't know this artist, but this is a significant piece. And this is a really rich political commentary that we have here in Alabama that relates to this really important moment. So that's one of my favorite works that we have. And I hope someday that it'll come out. But we often have Roger Brown works out because we have a big collection of his. But then there's other objects that I really enjoy teaching with. I love to work with faculty or work with other groups to think about what objects would resonate with them. So we have this really wonderful photograph from Gordon Parks, who, if you're not familiar, he was a photojournalist, artist, filmmaker, director of Shaft, but did a lot of work for Life magazine to document his African-American communities and the effects of segregation of that time. And he did a series down in Mobile, Alabama, documenting a local Black family in the area. And we have one of those photographs in our collection, and it's a black and white photograph of a young Black woman and with her daughter. They're dressed very nicely, looking through a storefront window. But to the left of the photograph, you can see the edge of a car, and you can see Gordon Parks you can't see him, but you can see the presence of him because you can see the angle of which he's leaning out of the car to take the picture. And so it's just this nice moment where you can kind of see the act of the photograph being taken, and then thinking about that photograph in a legacy of other civil rights photographers and contemporary photographers around Black Lives Matter and other kind of social movements today. So that's one that I love teaching with.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a significant story behind both of those. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for your position, after these collections and the exhibits are planned and everything, where does your role come in as you're working to build these partnerships and to find people to collaborate with?
Yeah, it comes, I'm always just trying to think outside the box, I think.
Yeah.
I think, because a lot of the work I do is about public programs and public engagement, and oftentimes that can take the form of like an artist talk or a scholar talk, and those can be really useful. But I think there's other ways that people can engage with the museum that are experiential, that are maybe kind of unconventional. So a couple years ago, when I first started, we had an exhibition called Invisible Thread, which was a group exhibition by contemporary artists thinking through spirituality and religion. And it seemed like a great moment to think about different types of holistic practices that could happen in the gallery spaces. And so we started a series called Self-Care Saturdays, where we offer like meditation, yoga, poetry classes, music, and different things like that. And I think what a program like that does is encourages people to come back multiple times. I think people often think like, I come to the museum once and I check it off a list and I don't need to come back again. But I think the more diversity in our programming, we can show that there are many ways to engage with the collection and to the exhibitions that are not just by myself, being introspective, but I can be in conversation with other people. I can be doing other things, and that allows me to see the work differently. This past semester, we had Dr. Kari Allen Lee, who's a musician here at Auburn, play music in our Black Codes exhibition. And I had such a profound experience listening to his music while being amongst the objects that was different than I would have had on my own. And so I think my work is really thinking about responding to the exhibitions in interesting and creative ways that are honoring those exhibitions, and then giving pathways for people to see those works differently. And I think of it a lot as a form of interpretation. Like we often think about interpretation in a museum as the text that's on the wall that tells us what we're looking at. But I think these experiences can be another form of interpretation where it allows people to create their own meaning or experiences.
Yeah. And that's so exciting that the Jule is so supportive of helping find new ways to experience museums and things like that. We're talking about in a public history class that Sophia and I both took last semester about how museums are evolving and being able to have the courage to explore museums in the non-traditional way. It's so neat that the Jule is facing that head on and excited to evolve the experience.
Yeah, I think it is really exciting, and it can be challenging too. I mean, I feel like sometimes my work in the museum makes other museum staff really nervous because I'm asking people to come into the space and do maybe unconventional things.
Right.
But I think I think my role and other roles like that, it's also about building trust and building trust with staff and community members. And, there's a lot that goes into kind of turning over the space to different community groups to lead different programs. And that's one of the parts of the job I really enjoy, is when I get to work with different members of the community and help them think about how their practice or what their knowledge or what their expertise could offer to our audiences and to our understanding of the art.
Yeah, absolutely.
My thanks to WEGL 91.1 FM and the It's All History to Me podcast for talking with Randi Evans and featuring the museum as part of this series. All museum programs, including this podcast, are made possible by listeners like you. Visit the museum website at jcsm.auburn.edu to show your support. Thanks.